The Red River Farm Network is celebrating women in agriculture during this month of March. We have a series we're calling Agricult-HER, and we want to thank all of our good sponsors for making this opportunity possible. Great to visit today with Betsy Jensen, farm business management instructor with Northland Community and Technical College, and of course, a farmer herself in the Stephen, Minnesota area, and in the very northwest corner of the state. Betsy, first of all, pleasure to have a chance to connect with you.
Thanks, Don. It's nice to talk to you every time, too.
Yeah, let's visit. Let's talk a little bit about your start in agriculture. How did you grow up on the farm?
We did. It ended up being a hobby farm. We actually had a case dealership, and then, Case kind of wanted you to get bigger. And so my dad and grandpa decided to sell out the dealership, but we still had the farm. So I was active in 4-H, had my 4-H sheep, FFA, showed hogs. So I was the hobby farmer.
So where was home for you?
Well, I live near Canada, but I actually grew up south of I-90, Bryceland, Minnesota. I had no idea that there was life beyond corn and soybeans and pigs. I had no idea that anything else existed. So I come up to the valley and I'm like, what on earth are all these crops? This is ridiculous. It was a big change from southern Minnesota, that's for sure.
Well, tell me about that journey. How did you make your way to northwest Minnesota?
Well, I ended up in NDSU, loved NDSU. And then, of course, fell in love. I will say Stephen, Minnesota was not on my bucket list when I was a senior in high school trying to decide what to do with my future. Marrying a farmer was not on the list. And so if anyone's out there listening and they're thinking, I don't think I can make it work, it's not, I mean, it's not the dream for everyone, but it turns out being an amazing life.
God has other plans for us, right?
It is funny how you try to make plans and it just did not. Nope, that was not the plan. And this one is even better than I could have hoped.
So how did you find your way into being a farm business management instructor?
So I started off in college. I was an ag econ major and I loved commodity marketing. So I got my commodity marketing license when I was in college. And it was frustrating because I would call a farmer and I'd say, "Hey, Don, we got a great basis now on wheat. Let's lock in 20,000 and then probably, give it a couple months." And there would be silence on the other side of the phone. And I just kind of knew like farmers don't get this commodity marketing thing. They don't understand puts and calls. One of my job when I worked at the brokerages was to uh, get the list of expiring options. And then I had to call people whose options were expiring and make them aware. Well, Don, that was a pretty dang easy job because nobody had any options that were expiring with value. And I just realized like farmers are just not good at this. And so farm management decided to branch out into commodity marketing. And so I joined the college to help teach farmers commodity marketing. And then moving into financial planning and financial education came along with that.
Uh, Obviously, something you enjoy today, and you're really in a busy time of year as well.
Yeah, this is a little bit of chaos right now. This is when we're meeting with our farmers and helping them understand their cash flows, their balance sheets. How did they do last year? We do accrual adjustment income statements. There's a few phases that trigger me, Don, when it comes to farm management. And one of them is, well, my banker just tells me how much money I made. What? No. I can't imagine having that much at stake and relying on one of your suppliers to tell you how well they've done. And your bank should absolutely be your business partner, but to rely on your lender to make your decisions for you, that's very uncomfortable for me. I guess I am kind of a control freak. I want to know what's going on. I just like when farmers can understand their finances, make a plan that works. It's a very rewarding job. I do love my job, Don.
Of course, you and your husband also farm. You have a seed business. You do writing. We see your column in the Prairie Grains magazine. You wear a lot of different hats. It's obviously you like to stay busy.
Yeah, so remember when I said I didn't want to farm? I mean, that wasn't the plan. None of this was the plan, Don. That's probably what makes it the most hilarious is this was not the plan at all. And it's just turned out to be an amazing lifestyle. And I did grow up in a small town. Moving to a small town wasn't a shock for me. Um, but being as involved in agriculture as I am, that was kind of if you would have told 16-year-old Betsy this was her life, she would have laughed at you pretty hard. Yeah.
Well, tell me something about your career that people wouldn't know or wouldn't think of um, off the top of your head.
Well, so off the top of my head, and maybe it's is obvious, but I do love numbers. Like I want to be able to quantify everything. And so I hope when we're looking at farmers out there right now in their farm business, they have someone on the farm who has the gut feeling and someone on the farm who has the numbers to back it up. And I love numbers. It's very uncomfortable to go with my gut feeling. I don't know if I have faith that I make good decisions, I guess, but I do, shooting from the hip is not something that I enjoy doing. And so if I can find a number to justify my decision or something to help me decide, I'm not a seat of the pants kind of gal, Don. I am a planner, and that I think is why I like farm management.
So, how involved with some of your clients are women in making these marketing decisions?
So it is disappointing. I will say I would like to have more women involved in the operations, and not even necessarily for marketing, but just for farm management in general. Um, and even if a spouse is not involved in the farming operation, I I just really want them to be more involved in the farm financial situation. Um, we've seen too often, something happens to the husband, or perhaps there's a break in the marriage, and the spouse doesn't know what's going on. Um, and I and I think part of it ties into, your family living and your personal decisions. A lot of those are based on how the farm is doing. There's years that you cannot go on vacation and you can't make some of those fun decisions. But then maybe in a couple years, everything's back to normal. I think having a spouse involved in making decisions just would make everyone's life a little bit better. And so I am kind of disappointed that I don't have more spouses involved.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions from the general public about our business and agriculture. What would you say we can do to change that, Betsy?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about agriculture, and the job that it entails. And I think, Don, not even outside of agriculture, but even within agriculture, the number of farmers that I have, maybe they're joining my program for the first time, they've never bothered to look at their numbers, right? They hand everything off to an accountant and they don't take into consideration the business side. So production agriculture is a lot more than production agriculture. And so if you are listening to this and you don't have a farm to go home to, or you aren't interested in farming, there's a whole business side of the equation that people don't often see. I think we pigeonhole ourselves into thinking that you have to be driving a tractor and you have to be getting muddy, and there's all these other things that are the key to agriculture, and they are, but there's a lot more that goes to it as well.
You've got young girls. What opportunities would you like them to see in this business?
Oh, I would love to see. I think it is changing. Before everyone, well, I have three girls, they're not going to come home to farm, and I think that is changing a lot. I think people are realizing that there's definitely opportunities for daughters to come home and farm. I would say I'd say past 10 years, it's changed a lot. Even personally, when I first started this job in farm management 24 years ago, it was only me. I was the only female farm management instructor in the state. And then a couple years later, there was a second one that got added. And now well over half of the farm management faculty in Minnesota are female. So it's changed. I think we are opening up all new opportunities. Um, I think it's also, I will say, let's back this up for a minute. Even for any of your kids, it is wrong to assume that we know where they're going to end up. Okay. I think about myself. This is not where I wanted to be. I think my goal was to always live in a small town. And I think about kids that are, oh, my son's not going to farm because he's going to go, be an engineer. He's going to go be a doctor, a dentist, or a teacher. The number of second career people that I work with is very high, Don. And whether that's a daughter or a son, please don't assume that you know where your farm operation is going to go, because 10 years off the farm and that child might decide, you know what, that agriculture really, I miss it. I miss being in the small town and I miss the hands-on work.
What was it like? What was it, 24 years ago when you were the only woman in the room?
So, yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. And when you going to college as an ag econ, there weren't a lot. There was a handful of women in there too, but it was still mostly men. Um, but I don't know that it bothered me a whole lot. I got my own hotel rooms at all the conferences. I never had to share a room with anyone. So there were little perks and advantages. And sometimes I would, when I was checking into the conference, I'd be like, I'm the only woman. Is there any chance you could put me in a room somewhere else? And they'd give me like the tub suite, or something, the hot tub suite. So I did my best to take advantage of it. But it sure is nice to have a good mix of men and women now in farm management.
So when you look at your time in farm management, what would you say would be some career accomplishment or something you're most proud of?
Oh, I mean, Don, there's people that have been in my program since day one.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it is so much fun to watch their operations grow and change. And keep in mind, for farm management, I don't have the answers, right? Like everyone's farm is unique. Everyone's farm is different. Everyone's goals are different. But it is sure to watch operations grow and change and new generations come in. It's very, very rewarding job. We don't have any openings right now that I know of, but if you're thinking about a side job, we do have a lot of our faculty farm as well, because it's the winter time that we are busy, working with farmers and their financial statements. So it is a good side job to have. It also keeps you aware of what's going on in agriculture. Everyone thinks they're normal, okay? Like, oh, my dad and I don't get along. My brother and I don't get along. We got this weird thing over here. Nope. Everyone has those. It's family business. You are as normal as everybody else is.
So what kind of organizations are you involved in? What kind of things do you do for fun, Betsy?
Well, for fun, or what am I involved in? So I've been an EMT for about 20 years now, too. So that's when I'm home, I usually have my pager on and I take call. So that's something that's a little unique. Not sure that's for everybody, but I do enjoy being an EMT. I was this morning, I had to coach my little sixth graders basketball team. I'm not good at basketball, but I can yell just fine. So I can, it's like herding cats sometimes. Very active in the church. We have a great church, First Lutheran in Stephen, that I'm proud to be a part of. And then for fun, if I could, I would travel somewhere every month. I'd love to. I mean, that's my ultimate goal, is to vacation somewhere different all the time. So if anyone has any good trip ideas, let me know.
One of my favorite Betsy stories is the table that you've got from the
Oh,
grain exchange. Share that with us.
yeah. So this was a long time ago. I'm going to say early 2000s. We were at the grain exchange. We were with a group of people there, and my husband and I joked. I said, "Hey, if ever those tables come up for sale, we're going to get one." And we all laughed, right? Because it was funny. We joked about how we'd have to add on to the house and everything else. Well, if you didn't know that, the grain exchange floor has closed, right? Minneapolis Grain Exchange is now, there's no more in-person trading. And so the tables came up for auction, and my husband turned about five shades of white and went, "Oh no." All this joking for how many years, and it's finally come true. And so I did. I got one of the grain exchange tables. Getting it to Stephen was not easy. Like, they had to take a crane and send it out the window, and then, like, of the grain exchange, and then I hired a guy to drive it up here, and he backed out. The second one was able to do it, and so Christmas Eve it was delivered. And when I say we had to add on to the house, we actually took a wall off of our office and then moved the table in. So we joke that we have a post-nuptial agreement. Some people have prenups. We have a post-nuptial, that in the event of divorce, this table will be mine. I'll have to I mean, the asset I get is the table, because it really is an amazing. It's so much fun to have, and it always brings me a smile when I walk into the farm office. So if anyone is ever picking up seed or swinging by Jensen Seed Company, right now the problem is it's a junk collector, right? Like it's a big giant table, and there's a lot of stuff on it right now. So my tax planning, everything else is spread out all over that table. But it is really neat to have that wheat table back in spring wheat country.
Think of the history that that table has
Oh,
had.
well, and it's just crazy. They sent me a plaque of what the floor looked like with all the tables lined up. And yeah, you open up the drawers. I mean, there's wheat dust in them. I mean, it's incredible to think of how much grain was traded over that table, and now I happen to have it in my office. And we did hear stories of some companies bought them, right? Not unaware that there's actually three legs under them, so you can't pivot it around a doorway, right? Because there's three sets of legs underneath it. So some of them had to be cut in half to get up. They bought them when didn't really measure how big the elevators were going to be, and but ours we just had to take off a wall, slide it in, and then in my defense, the wall needed to be replaced. It wasn't just because of the table, but it might have maybe accelerated that construction project.
I love that story.
Yeah.
Uh, So obviously we're really focusing in and celebrating women in agriculture. What advice would you have for others as they look at this business, Betsy?
Well, for anybody, don't assume that this is a man's operation, okay? And I still hear it. I mean, I hear it all the time. My son. Let's focus on your children. We don't know what your children are going to want to do, and we don't know which one is going to come home to farm. So keep that in mind. Keep an open mind about who wants to be in agriculture. And then also know that there's lots of different roles on the farm. And I am the B team when it comes to driving grain cart or track. I mean, are you sure you need me, Brian? Okay, fine, I'll go out there. But I am not the one. I mean, sometimes my little fingers help to fix stuff, right? Like sometimes when you can't get your fingers in somewhere small, I can come out to save the day. But you have to have areas of expertise on your farm. And so wherever you choose to do that, whether you're going to be the agronomist, repairs, the bookkeeper, the physical labor, there's lots of different roles. And just join in where you feel comfortable. What do you enjoy the most? And there's a role in agriculture for you.
Oh, so much fun. I enjoyed the conversation, Betsy.
Thanks, Don.
Very cool. Betsy Jensen with us from Stephen, Minnesota, as we celebrate women in agriculture for this series we call Agricult-HER. I'm Don Wick for the Red River Farm Network.